Hi all, and welcome back to the Valencia Property Podcast. That music you just heard was the hymn of Valencia, and I thought it was pretty appropriate to start with that. This month we have to talk about what happened on October the 29th, and the aftermath of the biggest floods ever to hit Valencia. And in that I include the 1957 floods which affected the city itself. I want to point out one thing here though before starting. There's so much I've left out in this. I didn't want the podcast to be overlong. People have been asking me for a concise explanation of what happened, where it happened, and what can be done to help. So I wanted to keep it concise. Therefore, here's a podcast about what happened in Valencia last week. I'm not in Ground Zero, and Ground Zero is a huge area, but I have been to some of the affected areas, as have members of my team here at Valencia Property helping out. Here's what we know and what is relevant based on the questions we've been asked. First things first though, the city is fine. The new riverbed built after the floods in 1957, it did its job of protecting the city itself. That's the basics. But before we get to that, the questions that have to be asked now is how do we protect, or even can we protect, the outlying flat areas? It's a big question now, and really it always has been. Back in the early 2000s, plans were made that may have protected the area, and they were always thrown out or ignored as being too expensive. Well, look how much climate change costs now if you do not mitigate it. For those of you listening who may know me, or even may not, I'm fine. My family is fine, and as far as I know, all of our clients are fine. One of our clients has a house in Picanha, one of the epicenters of the flood, but it escaped very lightly, unlike the town. The town was a wreck. They just had a little water in the living room and a flooded garage below, but they were away at the time. One client had some minor damage to an outside wall in Valencia, but the affected areas are not the places we usually concentrate on, as 80% of our clients buy in the city of Valencia itself, and the areas we tend to recommend, like La Liana, Bétera, La Pobla, Nácara, Olacau, Serra, etc., they got very lucky. Riberoja is another area we cover extensively, but it was the town itself and the area around the River Turia that was affected, not the estates where we normally see properties. Valencia, as mentioned, had some damage and cars washed away, but mostly escaped the worst of it. We got lucky, as I said. Unfortunately, the area to the south and west of the city didn't get lucky. They got very, very unlucky. A storm so bad that more than 60 centimetres of rain fell in less than a day in Turis, and almost 50 centimetres fell in 8 hours in Chiva, which has a usually dry riverbed running right through the centre, and it suffered major damage as a result. There'll be more on this and damage later, but let's tell the story of what happened in the days preceding the floods. In the week before the Dana, that's the name given to a big storm of this type, the Spanish Weather Service started warning that it was coming and could get bad. Every day they emphasised heavy rains could affect the area. The local government ignored the warnings. On the morning of Tuesday the 29th of October, the Weather Service issued a red alert around 9 o'clock for the area to the west and south of Valencia. And this means Valencia too, as that is where the water ends up. The university immediately acted on it and sent all staff and students who had arrived back home and told everyone else on the way to go home. No classes. The regional government ignored it. By ignoring it, everybody went to work, and work in Spain finishes between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m, so nobody could go home before then. By 2 p.m, the Diputación, which is part of the local government charged with providing services to the 266 town halls in Valencia, were sending people home. They didn't extend this to a general warning to the population as a whole, so everyone had to stay in work, children had to stay in schools, and nobody knew what was already happening in places like Chiva, except the people in Chiva. In Valencia City at this point, it wasn't even raining. There had been some rain in the morning. But experience from 1957 and other times shows that this shouldn't matter. In 1957, it didn't rain heavily in the city either. It rained in the mountains, and then the water finds its way down to the River Turia, and usually down the dried up riverbeds to the city and the surrounding flatlands. The alarm, responsibility of the local government, eventually sounded just after 8 p.m, when everyone's phone blasted out the warning alerts. By this time, loads of places were already underwater. There have been interviews with people who received the alert while fighting for their lives up a tree or in a car being washed away as the floodwaters surged around them. Great timing, guys. When the alarm went off, people went to their car parks to get the cars out because they expected to have time to take it to slightly higher ground. Nobody had told them that the water was arriving now. They came out to traffic jams as it was rush hour, as everyone had been forced to stay in work, and then they were sat in their cars as water rose around them. Once more, I'll say it very clearly for anyone who needs to hear it. The majority of deaths could probably have been avoided if the alerts had been sounded earlier, preferably in the morning when the university told their staff and students not to come in. Then it started. We started to see the videos on social media of flooded streets, cars being washed away, people jumping onto car roofs to save themselves, bridges being washed away, everywhere flooding as the waters rose. With it being dark, the worst wasn't realised until the next day. Outside the affected areas, we went to bed wondering if we would be woken up by floods near us. In the affected areas, there was no going to bed. Next day, the scenes were apocalyptic. Scenes you only see in horror films. You know that bit when the zombies are about to hit you. As the water levels dropped and the water went away towards the Albufera and the sea, the streets were revealed, and there were twisted wrecks of cars, buildings, broken trees, rubbish bins and more, and everything was covered in deep, deep, wet mud, brought down the dry riverbeds and the rivers from the areas where the rain had hit really hard. I'm sure you have seen the scenes, so I don't need to describe them more. If not, take a quick look on YouTube, you'll find them. Anyway, the aftermath, and a lot of this is politics, so a quick primer for you. Spain is a country made up of autonomous communities, each of which has their own responsibilities. Emergency response is the responsibility of the autonomous community at level 1 and 2, and is handed over to central government at stage 3. The autonomous community decides on the level of response and the help they ask for from central government. As an example of this, when Mazón came into power last year, one of his first acts in order to get support from the far-right Vox party was to eliminate the Valencian Emergency Response Department. They bragged about this on social media as a waste of money and it being full of political appointments as a money-making machine for the PSOE. Those tweets were deleted on Wednesday, but the internet has a memory, of course. Chickens have come home to roost, I believe. But anyway, we've got bullfights now, so hey. Back to government responsibility. Spanish central government cannot just send the troops in and get things done. Imagine if this had happened in the Basque Country or Catalonia and Spain had sent the army in, and you get an idea of the problems it could cause. The reason for this is that emergencies at lower levels can supposedly be handled by the regional government due to their competencies, that's the Spanish word, competencias, and they can choose what help is required from central government, and that's an important thing. They can choose, they can ask for it. Once a level 3 alert is called, organisation changes from regional to national, and this can cause bureaucratic headaches in the changeover, so regional leaders are loath to call for level 3. Anyway, the leader of the Valencia regional government, in his infinite wisdom, decided that this was not a level 3 emergency. I don't see what would need to happen for it to be declared a level 3 emergency in his imagination, maybe Valencia falling into the sea perhaps, but he kept it to level 2, and it's still level 2 even now. And he refused help offered from other parts of Spain that did not have a PP ruling party. For example, Catalonia offered help, he refused. The Basque Country's firemen offered help, he refused. They came down anyway. Central government kept asking him to level up to a 3, and he refused. Therefore, the official response in the affected areas was terrible. Help was not arriving due to roads being cut off and washed away mostly, but also this vacuum in responsibility. Yesterday we saw why, perhaps. Mazón asked for €31 billion to help out. I worked that out at around 150,000 per person in the affected area, and compare that with the COVID funds, which was 40 billion in total. His party will get to distribute these funds. His party is the only party in Spain that has been condemned in court for having corruption at its core for public works, though most of the other parties do it to a less organised extent. I'll just leave that here. His party is institutionally corrupt according to the Spanish courts, and they want €31 billion. On the other hand, the people did an extraordinary job. People started walking from Valencia to the affected areas to help out. The solidarity of the Valencian people has been amazing. Also, from the rest of Spain, convoys of aid started pouring in, and the organisation of this aid was done by the local people rather than the Generalitat. People in the affected areas started sending out messages on social media saying what was needed and where to go to help. The Valencians started going to those areas. 3 days after the flood in Catarroja, some firemen got there and spoke to the people living there who hadn't seen a police car, any help from the Generalitat, or any official bodies. The firemen were the first officials to arrive. Little direct aid from people had arrived either, as it was further out from the city, and Paiporta and Picaña and a few other places had been the big news. Eventually, the regional government asked for greater military help, and the central government sent 5,000 extra troops to complement the 500 that had been sent previously. At this point, we say only 500 because that's what Mazón asked for originally. Then everyone, volunteers, organisations and more, were told to stay away on Sunday because the king was visiting and we wouldn't want him to see the great unwashed helping out, would we? Anyway, the king visited with Pedro Sanchez, head of the national government, and Mazón, head of the regional government, and all hell broke loose, with mud and stones being thrown at the official party as a group of agents provocateurs from the local Nazi party, yes, we have Nazis here, started causing trouble and trying to lynch Sanchez. They left Mazón alone, funnily enough. This was all due to the usual suspects spreading misinformation all over social media about who has the responsibility for sorting this mess out. It wasn't a good look for Sanchez as he ran away, but his security team got him out of there. The king stayed around to talk with people despite being filmed saying to a protester, "Well, if you don't want me here, I'll go back to Madrid." Nice empathy, bro. Sanchez gave a press conference calling out the Nazis, and of course everyone got the wrong end of the stick because they are being played by clowns like a guy called Javier Negre online. He's like the Spanish Steve Bannon, if you like, who accused him of calling everyone there troublemakers. That's not what happened. And that brings us up to today at the moment. 7 days after the event. Let's look at what's happening and what needs to be done. Online information and disinformation is all over the place. It's best not to follow a random bot on Twitter posting rubbish which everyone then sends to all of their friends on WhatsApp. Check everything first before sharing it. If it's something that will help the situation, then share and get involved. If it's just tragifluencing, I think that's a word, then move on. If it's designed to get a visceral reaction out of you, then probably block. Spain has its own Fox News, its own Nigel Farages and Tommy Robertsons, grifters just looking for their next payday. Ignore them. Cleanups are still going on in the affected areas and will be for a long time. Donations of food, clothes, furniture, bedding, etc. are being accepted, and they will be needed for some time. But most places are well supplied now. We will keep you informed on the blog each week about initiatives that can help out and what you can do. In last week's post, for example, we talked about donating to the Red Cross here because that's the best way of getting money into the area and you know it's going to the area. If we can get more granular on the donations and help further down the line, we will. At all times, we have to remember that some people have lost everything and there are over 220 deaths officially so far confirmed, with almost 2,000 people missing. The affected areas will take a long time to recover fully, if they ever do, of course. The uncertainty will be at the back of everyone's mind every time heavy rain is forecast and they hear rain outside as they go to bed. Can this happen again? Will the warnings come in time? Will our regional government continue to be as useless and incompetent as they've been this week? The answer to that last question, and to the others, is very probably yes. A lot of people listen to this podcast, though, to find out more about Valencia and the place they hope to call home sometime in the near or far future. And this part is directed to them. What does it mean for you if you're thinking of coming to live here in Valencia? Well, still come. Don't call off your visits. At the moment, keep away from the affected areas. Local, on-the-ground knowledge is more value than all hands on deck. Believe me, there are plenty of people helping out. If you're a tourist coming to Valencia, then come to Valencia. You won't see anything of this. The local economy will welcome you with open arms. If you're going to do a reconnaissance trip to Valencia to scope out areas for future living, then come to Valencia. We'll supply you with the local knowledge that is involved in making this decision, including where you should and shouldn't be looking for whatever reason. If you want to buy in Valencia, then buy in Valencia. Of course I would say that, but it's true. Every time somebody buys, 10% is paid in tax. That money goes into the local government in order to supply services. But one thing, don't be that French person who contacted us on the 30th of October, one day after the disaster, wanting to know what this would mean for prices in Valencia, wanting a good deal off someone affected so they could rent it out for investment purposes. And yes, I did tell them to fuck right off. Of course, I used a few more words than that, but that's what we do. We don't take advantage of people's situation. Despite this disaster, let's call it what it is, a disaster, and despite what may happen in the future everywhere, if you want to live a good quality of life, then Valencia is a great place to do it. The climate is changing everywhere. Yesterday, Barcelona was flooded. Saturday, Sitges. Friday, Tarragona, as the storm moved north slowly. This year, there have been huge floods in Poland, the Czech Republic and Italy. We won't even go into the damage caused by various hurricanes and storms in the Gulf of Mexico and the States, and the flooding earlier this year in California, and the wildfires in Portugal, Canada and Brazil. Climate change is happening, and things like this will happen more often all over the world. Hopefully, we've now had our 1 in 50 year storm, but Valencia is still a great place to live. We all need to pressure our governments to take climate change more seriously and to stop imprisoning those who wake us up to it. We should be imprisoning the deniers, and then the fossil fuel companies' executives can keep Marathon Company in jail. One thing that has stood out throughout the last 6 days since this event happened was the solidarity of the Valencian people and the Spanish people, and also those of us who are privileged to call Valencia our home. Everyone was mucking in, be they Valencians from the rest of Spain, Brits, Americans, Dutch and others who came down here from Northern Europe, the North Africans from Morocco and Algeria, our South American residents. Everyone wanted to know how to help and tried to do what they could to help. The supposed snowflake generation of teenagers stepped up immediately and got on with the cleanup, even those who hadn't tidied the room for 6 months. Businesses donated time and resources to help, and Valencian and Spanish society coalesced into a great effort to help out. All around Spain, solidarity and help poured in, proving once again what a great place Spain is to live and what great people live here. If there's one thing to remember from this, it's that other people here have got your back. We have a society here. Come and join this society, and more importantly, become a part of it. You won't regret it. Next month, we'll be back with more news about the property market, more news about Valencia, and more of what you all enjoy rather than what we have had to endure. If you have any questions about this and about what it means, then contact us in the usual way via mail on information@valencia-property.com or on our socials, and we'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. We had to bring this episode out on its own. No other news, no other information, and we think it's the right thing to do. We hope it helps you to understand what happened and the context it comes in. Until next time, this is Graham from the Valencia Property Podcast, signing off. We'll speak to you next month.